Lions season review for 2019. I guess most Lions fans will be pretty disappointed with the way this season went. We've kind of come to expect pretty high things from the Lions in recent years, which is a nice thing because it wasn't all that many years ago that the Lions were a pretty poor team, kind of like my Blues, but they turned things around. I know a lot of you guys mentioned in the comments there's always hope for the Blues if the Lions can turn things around, so I guess we'll see if that's true. Lions finished 9th overall, 1 point off the playoffs with an 8-win, 8-loss record, so it was 50-50, but not quite enough to get things done. If you look at last year, they finished 2nd overall with the conference system the way it was. So from 2nd to 9th seems like a huge drop, but if you look at the results, last year was 9 wins and 7 losses, so it's only one result different, and yet that drops them all those places. So this season was definitely a lot more even, which is only a good thing for the comp, but perhaps it didn't work all that well for the Lions. And you have to look at the amount of guys that the Lions have lost over the years, and you feel like that's starting to add up into especially a few key areas, which I'll go over in a minute. I'll go over the good stuff, some of the bad stuff, and then have a look at what we might expect from the Lions next year. So good. Ball in hand, attacking, their numbers are all pretty good. So 5th for average run meters, 5th for going 7+ phases. So that's not 1st, 2nd, or 3rd, but I mean, it's still top quarter or top third of the table. So positive indicators. 1st for line breaks, which I was impressed with. It's pretty difficult to be 1st above some of those other teams who are good at cutting teams to bits, but the Lions were 1st. However, there's a drawback there in that when you look at their average number of tries scored, they were 8th. So you feel like if you're creating line breaks, those are your key opportunities to score tries. So perhaps too often the Lions were not able to convert on the opportunities they created. 4th for tackle bust is another good offensive stat. Goes with line breaks pretty well. You get a tackle bust, often you get a line break. And 5th for pick and drives is more of a tactical thing. They do like the ball in hand. If you look at their kicking numbers, which is not necessarily a negative thing, but they were the where have I got it? Was it 11th? 13th for kicks and kick meters. So they're right towards the bottom. They're not a team that likes to kick the possession away. They like ball in hand, which is, again, a tactical choice, and it works a lot of the time. They were the 4th overall team for lineouts won per game. So it means they were given plenty of opportunities to throw the ball in and get it back. However, that may again speak to the tactics, because when you look at their overall lineout percentage, they were 7th. So this is probably them missing Franco Mostert a bit. So although they're getting those opportunities to get lineout ball more than other teams, they're not necessarily always winning that. They're kind of middling. And on the opposition ball, this is a bad one. I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself, but they were 11th. So not that flash in the lineout. Certainly getting a lot of chances to throw the lineout in, but not dominant on their own ball and far from dominant on the opposition ball. A good stat, though, very good, is they are the 1st team for winning penalties. Some people will look at that game against the Rebels where they had 20-1. There was a bit of controversy about the reffing, but it is what it is. They, over the course of the season, you can't just look at one game, the number 1 team at winning penalties and 12th for conceding penalties. So discipline, very good. Work at the breakdown, very good, because they are the 3rd best team at forcing penalties at the breakdown. So definitely a lot of positives there for the Lions. Some key players who I'll go over in a moment there as well. But that's all it for the good stuff. The bad stuff leans more towards some of the defensive aspects of their game. So they were the 2nd worst team, so only below the Sunwolves for points conceded. That's a pretty bad stat. So they're getting line breaks, not scoring, but conceding a whole truckload of points. That's pretty poor. 2nd for tries conceded, again, kind of goes hand in hand with points conceded. They were only 12th for having to make tackles, which speaks to the number of tackles per game, which speaks to their possession, not having to make as many tackles as their opposition, not kicking the ball back to the opposition, not needing to make those tackles, but 5th for missed tackles. And I've talked about it in a lot of the other previous season reviews. If you're the team who makes the number 1 amount of tackles average per game, you probably should be missing tackles because the percentage should kind of align. But if your tackle count is low and your missed tackle count is high, something's not going right, because there are other teams who are making more tackles and missing fewer than you, so something's not right. Run meters conceded, they were third. So again, the other team's getting over their advantage line. They are first at that, conceding the advantage line, number one team. Line breaks conceded fourth. So they're conceding a lot of line breaks. And again, that concedes points. Fifth for making errors. And that perhaps leads into what we're talking about those line breaks not being converted into tries. I talked about the kicks. They're not a big kicking team. And penalty goals attempted, they were 11th. That's, again, not a bad thing. It means they'd rather go for the 7 than go for the 3. But, yeah, some pretty big defensive issues for the Lions, and that was apparent through their season. That was there last year as well, to be fair, and it hasn't been fixed. So they play a certain way. It's high risk, high reward, and this season some of those dice throws just didn't pay off. In terms of individuals, you had Quokka Smith. He was their top try scorer with 7. It's an interesting one that loose forward as your top try scorer, but I think the year before it might have been Malcolm Mark, so maybe that's just a Lions thing. Dianti and Skorsan had 6 each, so it's shared around the guys. It's not just one guy getting all the tries. Interestingly, Malcolm Marks was 11th overall in Super Rugby for average runs per game, not necessarily run meters, but that guy was busy. His work rate was high. Sylvia Mahuza, from his 6 games... So it's a pretty small sample size, but in terms of average line breaks per game, he was top 10 in Super Rugby. So again, small sample, but impressive when he was on the field, at least with line breaks. Elton Yankees is the number 1 guy in Super Rugby, average across the season, he played a lot of games, for line break assists. So that guy does get a bit of grief, and his tackle stats are poor. He's among the top 5 for average missed tackles per game, but the guy knows how to play or to run an attacking back line. So he perhaps deserves a bit more credit than a lot of us give him. Tyrone Green was in the top 20 for Super Rugby for average tackle busts per game. And also Malcolm Marks, Quokka Smith, and Mana Schoolman had very good numbers at forcing penalties at the breakdown and pilfers. So that perhaps leads into why so many penalties were won by the Lions and why their stats in that area are so good. So, yeah, defensively, not the best. A number of attacking players who can light the field up, so entertaining team to watch, but perhaps frustrating a bit as a Lions fan when you score 30 and concede 40. Overall, their season, their fixtures, opened the season with a win away to the Jaguares, which is a pretty unusual thing for them. They've been trying to get that win. I don't think they did it last year, did they? They sent a pretty strong team last year, but I don't think they got the win. But yeah, they started with a win in Argentina, which in recent years has been hard to come by, 25-16. I went back to South Africa and lost to the Stormers away in 1917, so a close one, bonus point loss. Third game was pretty disappointing. They lost to their rivals, the Bulls, at home, 30 points to 12, so that was a bit of a kick in the teeth. Then they backed that up with a win over the Jaguares, 47 points to 39, so not much tackling going on in that game from either side. But they did the double over the Jaguares, who are a team who made the final. They win against the Rebels, 36-33. That was the game with the high penalties. Then they win against the Sunwolves, 37-24 over in Singapore. So start with a win, 2 losses, then 3 wins on the trot. It looks like the Lions are going to be the strong team in South Africa. Then a few losses. They lose to the Sharks at home. It's a pretty devastating one, 42 points to 5. That is embarrassing. Probably their worst loss of the season. Lose to the Brumbies away, 31 points to 20. This is their tour of Australia and New Zealand, just the 3 games because they've already done the 1 game in Singapore. They win against the Chiefs away, which was not an easy thing to come by in New Zealand, but the Chiefs did lose a few home games this year, 23 points to 17, and they lost to the Crusaders down in Christchurch, 36 points to 10. The Crusaders are just a team that they struggle to beat the Lions. It's just a thing. I don't remember the last time they got a victory over the Crusaders, but it's been a while. They win over the Waratahs, 29 points to 28, close one at home. Beat the Highlanders, 38 points to 29 at home, so season perhaps looking a bit more on track. Lose to the Sharks away, 27 points to 17. And remember, the Sharks had a pretty bad record at home, so the Lions perhaps would have been confident going into that one. Couldn't do it. They beat the Stormers at home, 42 points to 22. That's a good victory. And then they lose the last 2 games of the season when they were all but a win away from securing the playoffs. They lose to the Hurricanes at home, 37 points to 17. And then they lose to the Bulls away, 48 points to 27. Another one of perhaps their worst results of the season. So you look at those results, 2 losses to the Sharks and 2 losses to the Bulls. 50-50 record with the Stormers is not the best. In recent years, they have been dominant over the other South African teams, but that has definitely fallen away. They had a poor record against the South African teams this year. They did get a win in New Zealand, which is a good bonus. They had a 50-50 record against the New Zealand teams, although still can't beat the Crusaders, like I mentioned. And as I said, they did do the double on the Jaguares. They're probably fortunate, and they played the Jaguares early. Their first 4 games, 2 of them were against the Jaguares. So before they really hit their full stride under the new coach, they managed to get a couple of wins. But still, it says something that they can beat the team who made the final twice. So there's a few opportunities you look at in those fixtures and think, quite disappointing. Those 2 games in particular at the end, I mentioned the games against the Sharks, both pretty disappointing. The games against the Bulls, kind of far from ideal. Next year, the drain of players continues from Johannesburg. Malcolm Marx is going to be over in Japan for, I think, half the season. He's doing like a 6-month stint and then coming back to the Lions, so he'll be partially available. That one you kind of take as a win because they're still keeping the guy, even though he goes overseas to get a bit of a cash injection. The fact that he's not taking some long-term contract overseas is good news for South African rugby. Cocker Smith is also going to Japan. I believe he's coming back, but I couldn't find out the dates, if he's doing a full season or what. Other guys leaving: Stefan Levis, Nick Groom, Lana Mapu, Harold Forster, Ruan Combrink, Sylvia Mahuza, and Robbie Kutsia. So there's a few guys, quite a few guys, leaving at the end of this season. Guys who are confirmed staying, not all of them, but just a few guys to mention: Dylan Smith, Ross Cronier, Vincent Chichuka, I never know how to say that guy's name properly. Please let me know in the comments. Piwadianti, Andreas Kutsia. So there's still a few good guys staying, but there's also a lot of guys leaving. So how well they can bring a next generation of players through and who they're going to recruit kind of remains to be seen. The coach Swiss de Brain is also staying as well, so there's going to be a bit of consistency there. I know he had a week or 2 off this year with some stress-related stuff, but hopefully he's all good, and we will see them kind of go from strength to strength under his leadership, see if they can bounce back to the playoffs. What did you guys think of the Lions season? Where did it all go wrong? As I said, it's only 1 result different from last year, but on the log, it is quite the change. How do you think they're going to go next year? Do you think they're going to have the players to be competitive, or do you think they might struggle? It will be an interesting one to watch. You guys let me know your thoughts, and I'll talk to you again soon. See you later.